Hello and welcome to our breakdown of UFC 307 Pereira versus Rountree. We welcome all our Dine Sports viewers as we break down this pay-per-view event coming to you live from the Delta Center in Salt Lake City, Utah this weekend. Nick, how are you feeling about the pay-per-view card that we have this weekend?
Yeah, it's a little bit strange. I mean, there is a ton of name value on it. I mean, some people kind of knocking that Khalil's getting a title shot. Should be a fun fight, though, between two strikers. But we do need to keep in mind this is in Salt Lake City. This is at elevation. We've seen that affect fighters, their gas tanks, their cardio in the past. So definitely something to factor as we go through and present these breakdowns. But yeah, we got Pereira, one of the biggest fighters in the UFC in terms of name value. Aldo, absolute legend. And then we have Kayla Harrison, super big name as well. So a lot of name value on this card, more so towards the top, but definitely a fun one for sure. And just keep in mind, we got to deal with that altitude this week for sure.
Yeah, and even if you do have, a weaker fight card you put together for these pay-per-views, Pereira, he's proven to be a guy you could call, say, hey, you want to headline this event? He will say yes. That's the case here as he again defends his light heavyweight title here facing Khalil Rountree. The activity of Pereira, what we see, how often he's in the cage, even at this championship level, it's super impressive. Something that he was obviously used to throughout his kickboxing career. But to again be defending his belt this year, just certainly deserves a shout, especially during a time where some UFC champions are only out there once a year, putting on a title defense. Pereira here, a sizable favorite, minus 500 against Rountree, who can be had at plus 350. This is a bit of a mismatch. I mean, when it comes to Rountree, this five-fight win streak has been good, but the level of competition isn't anyone that impressive. And when you look at Rountree's resume as a whole, he does not have this, top three guy that we've seen him go in there and, completely walk through. Obviously, when things are going right for Rountree, he's a very dangerous opponent. His striking's great. His Muay Thai is excellent. So some of the techniques he's able to land are a bit, unorthodox. Obviously, he likes to go for those, lower oblique kicks and things like that, hurting his opponent really any way he can. And obviously generating a lot of power. Clearly well built. Here matching up with Pereira, though, it's going to be a skill issue in terms of, just tap for tap striking. If Rountree wants to attack this fight as he normally does, foot on the gas, moving forward, applying pressure to his opponents, looking for those heavy shots to land, it's going to be tough against a guy like Pereira, who has just proven time and time again, able to eat those counters. And anyone who stands across from him normally ends up getting knocked out. Rountree has a 7-minute, 50-second average fight time in the UFC. That's slightly shorter than that of Pereira. But both guys have incredible power. And when it comes to, chin durability, obviously we've seen Pereira wobbled at times. But I trust him and his hands much more to connect with Rountree before, the opposite occurs. Rountree not one to shoot takedowns. Through 15 UFC fights, he's not attempted a single takedown. So regardless of what you hear in media this week, it's going to be a wrestling match, we might shoot, things like that, I really don't expect it from either of these guys. And the grappling advantage in this fight would quite clearly go to Pereira, who we've seen him constantly working on his MMA grappling since he's joined, obviously preparing to defend takedowns from higher level grappling threats. It's really a matchup where he's only going to find trouble if he does end up getting caught. At this number, it's kind of tough to play Pereira, but you play him by knockout and, hope he continues the streak he's on. I think he does finish Khalil Rountree.
Yeah, I'm mostly with you, man. I mean, the biggest thing you've already highlighted is just the level of competition between these two. Pereira coming out 4 wins over former champions of the division, 2 over Brahashka, but before that, obviously wins over Strickland and Adesanya at 185 pounds as well. I mean, since this guy's made his ascension, he's pretty much only fighting champions. Other than that loss to Izzy a couple years ago, I mean, he's winning all these fights as well. And then we look at what Rountree's been doing. I mean, as impressive as he is, I mean, it's just really a shallow division right now. I'm not shocked that he's getting the title shot. I'm not up in arms about it. I do think Magomed Ankalaev is a name we have to bring up as someone who's probably more deserving. But regardless, I mean, we're going through the record here, Rountree. I mean, the win over Anthony Smith, certainly in the twilight of his career. Daukaus has been cut since then. The win over Jacoby, a fighter Pereira's knocked out in kickboxing, very controversial. I actually thought Jacoby won that fight. Win over Roberson was cut. His win over over Bukowskis, led to Bukowskis being cut. He's back with the UFC now, but I mean, we're talking about a bunch of guys who've been cut from the roster or are really getting up there in age. And again, Alex in there against the who's who with the division. It's almost like they're rewarding him for taking these short notice spots against Prochazka and saving UFC 300, taking on Hill, et cetera, et cetera. He is familiar with the southpaw look, which is what he's going to get here from Rountree. That does take away his super powerful front leg kick, but at the same time, he has shown he can throw it against southpaws as well. Rountree does check kicks well, but I actually think that's not going to be a super major factor here. Rountree absorbs roughly 4 significant strikes per minute compared to Alex's 3.5. At the same time, I mean, he's going to come forward, like you said, and that really just plays into the hands of a fighter like Alex Pereira. We've seen it with Strickland. We've seen it at times with Izzy and others. I mean, you come forward on this guy, you're really asking for trouble. I will say this, more than Alex by KO, I think I like fight doesn't start round 3. That's around -150. If you're parlaying, I'd go Alex inside the distance. Some narrative this week about him training with Kayla Harrison. They supposedly have a bet that they're not going to tell anyone about till after the fight. Wouldn't be shocked if he went for a club and sub or something like that. So just proceed with caution. You're probably not paying much extra juice to take the inside compared to just the KO. If it's only a few cents, just take the inside. Don't risk it. But I really like fight not to start round 3. Both these guys, super powerful strikers. I will say Rountree does have a puncher's chance, but a little bit surprised the line's not even wider in terms of money line. So totally fine with Alex Pereira here. We've seen bigger favorites that are much less deserving over the last few weeks. So I really do like him here. I think it's going to be in still. Pretty confident he gets it done with relative ease. But yeah, next we're probably going to see Ankalaev as long as he gets through Rakic. I think that's the fight most people have circled. UFC trying to milk as much out of this cash cow as they can before then. I think he's very live against Ankalaev. We'll talk about that fight when it comes up. But yeah, I mean, everyone kind of counting out Rountree. We've seen in the past. I mean, we'll talk about Juliana Pena in a minute. Strickland when he took on Izzy. I mean, sometimes when the narrative is so in favor of one side, we see the fight go the other way. But other than kind of a shocking KO here, I do really think Alex gets it done. Just a better technical striker, really good counter striker, does a good job kind of tricking his opponents, setting up traps. I think that's what we're going to see. 2 different levels of opponent. I'm on Pereira. I think he gets it done probably within 2 rounds.
And yeah, just mentioning that Ankalaev fight. Pereira will probably fight another kickboxer before that. Maybe he defends the title here. We'll fight Alberg or something, and then Ankalaev will be ready. Yeah, it should be a very fun main event. The same could be said for the co-main event. A woman's bantamweight fight between the champion Raquel Pennington and former champion Juliana Pena. Pennington, the -180 favorite in the spot against Pena, who could be had +145. Nick, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Pena is probably the more potent finisher here, but I do think Raquel is definitely the rightful favorite. More well-rounded game, certainly tighter in her striking defense, defending 60% of the strikes thrown against her compared to Juliana's 50%. The thing about Pena, I mean, she does have kind of surprising power for her frame, but she throws really a lot of hooks, looping shots. She telegraphs a lot of what she's doing. That fight against Nunes that she won and captured the title, I mean, really Nunes only gasped because she was beating up Pena so bad that she ran out of energy and didn't get the finish. Raquel, really not a fighter to chase finishes, not the most exciting fighter. I did back her in that title fight against Bueno Silva, pretty good performance. She likes to work her opponents up against the cage. I think she'll win most of this fight up against the cage with control time, things like that. But I do think in striking exchanges, she's going to be defending most of what Pena's throwing out at her. And the big thing here, too, is Pena's been out for more than 2 years. I mean, never a good sign. Just really can't get behind her. I mean, she talks a big game. She definitely does better marketing this division than most of the other women that are fighting in it right now. But at the same time, I think her ego is just a little bit too big. These two do have some history. They were on the season of Ultimate Fighter together. They were roommates at a time. But I do just see Raquel as the more technically sound, more well-rounded fighter. Juliana, probably the better jiu-jitsu player if the fight hits the mat, but I don't think it's a wide enough gap that she's going to be able to find a finish. Probably has a power advantage as well, but Raquel's super durable and really does a good job defending strikes thrown against her compared to what we've seen from Pena. And we hear a lot of narrative this week about how Pena is going to kind of dictate the pace, put out more volume. But when you look at the stats, Raquel's actually landing nearly a full significant strike more than her per minute. So I think that's a little bit overblown as well. I like Pennington here. I think she probably gets it done. The altitude, I do think maybe plays a part here as well. Raquel's never had issues with cardio. We have seen Pena Pena start to fade in a few of her fights. So I think if anyone's going to be affected by that, it's probably Juliana, especially on the 2-year layoff. I like Pennington here. At the same time, her style, it's tough to be super confident in a fighter like that who kind of fights for points, fights for the judges. But I do think she gets it done. I think the line is accurate right around -200. I'll probably maybe tie her in to like a 2-leg parlay, something like that. Not something I'd be loading up on, but I do think she retains her title here and then probably gets steamrolled by Kayla Harrison next time out, who we'll talk about in a little bit.
I am with you backing Pennington here in this fight. I agree Pena has better finishing equity in this spot than Pennington. My main fear regarding Pena would be her getting this fight to the mat and utilizing that jiu-jitsu. I think she has the ability to submit Raquel Pennington, but I find that's going to be a very unlikely outcome. Pena, her striking defense, as you highlighted, is just not very good. And as Pennington stays more composed throughout the course of this fight and utilizes the clinch where Pena will likely oblige to compete with her, Pennington should have no problem convincingly winning minutes and winning rounds in this fight. It's going to be an uphill battle for Pena to secure really any rounds here, I feel, without securing those takedowns. If Pennington's able to keep the feet and utilize good work in the clinch, she should be able to win this fight. And yeah, again, at this number, I probably won't bet her at all. The play, if anything, would be Pena inside the distance, probably the one look on that side. I'm leaning Pennington by decision, but yeah, probably not a fight I'm going to bet much on. Mostly watching and seeing who gets the belt. Next up, we will look at the featured bout, a fight at bantamweight between Mario Bautista and Jose Aldo. Bautista -140, the favorite here against Jose Aldo, who could be had +120. I like Aldo here as the betting underdog. He's proven he still had it. I mean, just fighting in May of this year and looking really good in a performance against Jonathan Martinez. He outlanded him. He also threw 174 significant strikes in that fight. He's still got it. I mean, Aldo still got it. The timing's still clearly there. The boxing's good. He does get hit a bit more than obviously we saw him in the past. But yeah, I think it's a clear striking advantage that Aldo holds here against Bautista. Bautista obviously poses a grappling threat in this fight, but what we've seen before from Aldo in terms of defending takedowns at this weight class, I really can't be afraid of Bautista's offensive wrestling, and his grappling isn't that potent. We haven't really seen a high number of submission finishes from Bautista. He's not really a guy that I see just taking down Aldo and smothering him on the mat. Even the champion Merab was unable to do so. So if Aldo's able to keep the feet, he probably will. Keep his back off the fence. He's going to land the better strikes against Bautista, who is a skilled, jiu-jitsu practitioner. But yeah, getting plus money on Aldo here. I think more of this fight is going to be standing than otherwise, and he's going to win more of those exchanges. So yeah, give me the King of Rio.
Yeah, that's 3 in a row that we're aligned on. Definitely here on Aldo. The line does seem to be closing, so we're recording this on Thursday evening. Definitely keep an eye on that. Would not be shocked to see him flip to the favorite by the time this fight goes off. But kind of similar to the main event, I'm just not all that impressed by the resume of Mario Bautista. Yes, he looked amazing against Ricky Simone, but against Loke Dog, Simone's last time out, Simone looks completely washed. And I don't know when that happened, if it was in the Bautista fight, but before the Bautista fight or during the last fight. But I mean, everyone's rating that win super highly, and I think that's why he's the favorite here. But at the same time, that's a fighter who's completely regressed. And you look at his wins before that, we're talking about Brian Kelleher, Guido Canetti. We were in Boston, his fight against Blackshear, super narrow decision.
Close, yeah.
Blackshear is undersized for the division, a guy who spent some time at flyweight. So I like Aldo here. And you mentioned the takedown defense, 91% in the UFC. It's been a long, long time since we've seen him taken down. The only guy who's been able to stay standing against Merab. And in that fight against Merab that he lost, it was a narrow decision loss. I mean, that was probably the closest Merab fight we've seen in quite some time. Really do like Aldo here on the feet. It's going to be interesting to see if Bautista can kind of get his own leg kicks going, try to strike from range. But there is no reach advantage here for him. He is a switch stance fighter, nothing that Aldo hasn't seen before. And yeah, I mean, Aldo, is he what he was in his prime as one of the best featherweights ever? No, not quite. But he's definitely adjusted his game, and it seems he's only really losing to the elite of the elite. Winning 4 of his last 5 fights, he's just been excellent. Wins over Munoz, Font, Martinez his last time out. Kind of feels like a similar matchup. Martinez more of a kicker than a puncher, but at the same time, I think that actually could play to Aldo's advantage even more so here against Bautista. We've seen Bautista KO'd by the likes of Trevin Jones, another fighter who's since been cut from the roster. Again, I think we see these matchups sometimes, and the young guy does seem to take over. But I don't really tout Bautista as like this super prospect at 135. We certainly have some in that division out of a great camp in MMA Lab. Definitely going to come in with a solid game plan. But Jose Aldo, to me, is probably one of the better value plays on the money line on this card. Finish, not very likely. I think you'd have to work Bautista to the body, maybe. Could maybe finish him late if he's really putting on the volume. But yeah, Bautista's a tough kid. I know he got starched by Jones. That was a little bit fluky. I like Aldo here. I think all the value is on him as the underdog. And yes, some concern maybe about the cardio, but this is only a 3-round fight. We've seen Aldo go 5 rounds relatively recently. So again, I think he gets it done here. We actually saw in that Font fight, he kind of turned things on in the later rounds. So he's certainly capable of kind of upping his volume as this fight wears on. Saying all the right things in media this week. I think he gets it done, like Aldo here as the underdog.
Love to hear you are with me on that one. Curious if the same goes for this one. A bout at middleweight we see between Kevin Holland and Roman Dolidze. Kevin Holland, the minus 170 favorite. That line closing. Dolidze plus 140 at the current price. It's an interesting matchup. At first glance, I was liking Holland quite a good deal. But stylistically, it is going to be a tough challenge just with what Dolidze does present. Good grappling skills, an ability to take the fight to the mat. Really, what I find most is ability to get control and really work offensive jiu-jitsu positions once he does get his opponents down. The last fight for Dolidze came up at light heavyweight facing Anthony Smith. He's a big guy, and Holland previously fighting down welterweight, meeting him here at middleweight. Both will look about the same in the octagon, but I think that strength of Dolidze could certainly play a factor if he is successful getting this fight to the mat. I believe he's only reached the rank of Jiu-Jitsu purple belt, while Holland is a black belt. But certainly if these two are going to have prolonged exchanges down on the canvas, it's going to favor Dolidze more than it is Holland, even though we've seen that lethal jiu-jitsu from Holland on display numerous times in the UFC. He'd prefer to keep this fight standing, utilize a 5-inch edge in reach that he does have against Dolidze here. He's much quicker, more effective at landing his attacks from range, and good with the kicks as well. He should be able to win out in a fight that goes to the scorecards, but again, I really do worry about Dolidze getting him down or perhaps threatening submissions here in this fight. My pick is going to be Holland, just slightly. Again, at minus 170, I probably will not be betting him. If this line continues to close, I may do so. But yeah, Dolidze is a bit dangerous. I don't rate him that high at all. I think his wins really aren't that. I mean, now he's got some big names to his record, but the resume as a whole isn't that impressive to me. I think Holland's been in there with better guys, and he can sort of rely on that experience in this matchup here, performing on another pay-per-view.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man. And I'm going to kind of lead on the Dolidze side, at least right now. Again, we always use this opportunity to plug our article that comes out on Saturday with our final picks, where we're picking each fight and the method. But the biggest thing to me here is the weight and the strength and the size. Dolidze, coming off a fight where he fought Anthony Smith at 205 pounds, won that fight against a top 10 opponent at light heavyweight. Holland, most of his good work recently has been coming at 170. They're kind of meeting in the middle here at 185, which is actually more of the natural weight class for Dolidze. Holland, when he was at 185, really struggled against other grapplers. We saw it against Vettori. We saw it against Brunson. And while I don't really put Dolidze on that level, I do think he should be able to secure takedowns here relatively easily. Like, even if his technical ability isn't there, I think he can muscle him down. It's just a question of fight IQ with Dolidze. It always is. This is not the sharpest fighter, really doesn't have a great understanding of footwork when he's striking, which could make it hard to kind of close that distance against Holland. But I do think if he could take him down, he's going to be really tough for Holland to deal with on top. So yeah, this is a tough one, man. I can certainly see it going either way. I do think Holland has been winning a lot by KO or club and sub, etc. It's going to be tough for him to put away Dolidze here, who is super durable, especially with Dolidze more naturally in his weight class where he's comfortable. I think the size difference is enough for me to maybe take a shot on the underdog. But if this is 3 rounds of just striking, Holland should win convincingly, in my opinion. It's going to be a question of wrestling, going to be a question of grappling. If Dolidze does choose to lean on that part of his game plan, I'm hoping we see Nissick in his corner from Extreme Couture, a guy who really does put together good game plans for his fighters. But we look at the stats, Dolidze averaging only 1.2 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's going to need more than that here, I think, to get this one done. Holland, really not great takedown defense. It has improved, but again, I think the size and the strength should be enough for Dolidze to win this fight if he can take it to the mat. It's just a question A of if he'll try, and B of if he can. I think he can. The question to me is if he'll try, and I don't know, man. It's just really tough to back either of these guys. They're both super inconsistent. I'll take a shot on the value of the underdog with very, very little confidence.
No, I can't blame you on that one. Certainly a live underdog in that fight. All right, opening up the pay-per-view, we have a women's bantamweight matchup. Kayla Harrison, the sizable favorite, minus 850, 1,000 some places, now getting Ketlen Vieira to 5-1, 6-1. I think Vieira's background in judo could make this an interesting fight. I mean, we've seen her sort of do well in those sorts of exchanges since joining the UFC. It's just Harrison is the best of the best when it comes to any sort of judo position. And these grappling exchanges that certainly are going to play out over the course of 15 minutes here. Bears look good, but I think this matchup is sort of a means to getting Kayla Harrison more shine and propelling her to that title shot. Since signing to the UFC, we saw Harrison in one fight, submission win against Holly Holm. Very impressive, but somebody who is easier to take to the mat and submit than a Ketlen Vieira will be. Vieira is going to give Harrison a bit more opportunity to find openings on the feet here, kind of work her striking a bit more. She uses the southpaw stance when it comes to closing the distance on her opponents and, going to the hip, trying to get to her opponent's hip or legs. And, against Vieira, she will have opportunities to land her fists a bit more. Harrison always training ATT, continuing to do so, and continuing to work on her hands now as she makes her ascension towards UFC gold. I don't think Vieira is really going to stand in the way of that climb for Harrison, but I don't think this is going to be like an easy rollover fight for her. She may be grappling a hard 13, 14 minutes here, fighting for that submission against Vieira, but I really don't see Ketlen very likely to submit unless Harrison can get her down dry and early. Certainly, though, Harrison, huge favorite, should be getting the win here. I'm not going to rush the player at an inside the distance, maybe even by decision, if I could get plus money or something like that on Harrison. But certainly I think she rolls here, gets a win one way or another.
Yeah, I don't need to add too much here. I mean, the UFC is very conscious of what they're doing. They have the bantamweight title on the line. They're putting Kayla Harrison on the same card, setting up that future title fight for her. They're paying her a ton of money. She's a client of Ali Abdelaziz, one of the big managers in the UFC. He really gets his fighters what they want. And I mean, when they signed her, they're paying her a ton of money. They really know what they want. They want her to win that title and then take on Amanda Nunes down the road. I think they're putting Ketlen Vieira here because she does have a decent number next to her name. But Vieira is pretty much Harrison, just slightly worse at everything. I mean, she has good jiu-jitsu, she has good judo, but she's not as strong as Harrison. Harrison has finally kind of, I don't know, not finally, but she's done a good job cutting down to 135, spending most of her career fighting at 145, even 155 in the PFL. Just going to be the stronger and better grappler here by a decent margin. Vieira has a very solid 92% takedown defense in the UFC, but no one really tries to take her down. This is a completely different matchup. I think she might be willing to engage in that clinch where she should get tossed and flattened. And I actually like Harrison inside near even money. Not going to say it's a lock or anything like that, but you're getting pretty much even money for her to win inside the distance. even though she's a massive money line favorite. Vieira, another fighter who we've seen kind of fade late in fights. I think the altitude could hurt her here and make it easier for Harrison to find that finish as long as she's successful early. I just don't think the UFC wants to play with their food in terms of putting Harrison in a matchup before the title that she could lose. And Vieira's tough, really solid fighter, but at the same time, she doesn't really present anything that Harrison isn't super prepared to deal with. So I like Harrison here, expect her to get it done inside the distance, and then call out the winner of that co-main event, whoever it may be. And yeah, probably gets a title fight, if not by the end of the year, early next year.
All right. Looking now at the prelims, the featured prelim, a matchup at welterweight between Joaquin Buckley and Stephen Thompson. Buckley, the minus 200 favorite here against Thompson, who could be had at plus 160. This is a fight that I've had some trouble with. I'm leaning the way of the underdog in Stephen Thompson. Now 41 years old. Obviously, there aren't going to be too many ranked welterweights for Thompson to go ahead and beat, moving forward. But when it comes to this matchup against Joaquin Buckley, I could see him having a lot of success. Buckley is rather conservative in his fighting style. He's a super powerful, heavy-handed guy, but when it comes to his style, he knows how to work 15 minutes to manage his energy, to blitz in at the right times, to score takedowns at the right time. Since debuting in the UFC when he was very green, Buckley has really come into his own. And I really, have to at least compliment the method in which he fights now, not just blitzing forward. He knows exactly who it is he's fighting in each matchup, it appears, and he knows the best way to approach it. I don't know if that's going to be the case here against Thompson, because I would advise Buckley, with his strength, upper body strength, rushing in and looking to secure those takedowns. Because in a striking match, even against 41-year-old Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, I think Buckley's going to get touched up. I think Thompson's going to be able to keep his distance. As Buckley blitzes forward, he's going to be able to touch him up, land counters. And if he's able to, get this fight into the second round, into the third round, those explosive bursts from Buckley are going to become fewer and fewer, especially here at altitude. And if it is going to play out as a kickboxing fight, that's going to favor Thompson as we get to the 12th, 13th, 14th minute. The only recent losses for Thompson, even as he is now on the back nine of his career, he's losing against very skilled grapplers, guys like Shavkat Rakhmonov, Gilbert Burns, the champion Bilal Muhammad. It's taking really elite grapplers to get Thompson down and not even submit him. A lot of the win against Gilbert Burns, a decision, Bilal Muhammad too, just effectively scoring those takedowns and just getting enough control time on top before Thompson's eventually able to fight his way back to his feet. I don't think Buckley can hold him down long. And again, it's probably going to be a struggle for him to close distance here and get those takedowns. So certainly I think he's the rightful favorite in this spot, given what we've seen out of Thompson lately. But yeah, still getting plus money on him in this stylistic matchup. I think Thompson's a very live dog. I'm going to take him.
Yeah, I'm not 100% decided, but I'm right there with you. I mean, this is one of the more binary fights on the card. We have the striker in Thompson, the grappler in quotes in Buckley, but he's really not a true grappler. I mean, the path is there for him. It's very obvious. He needs to take Thompson down, secure takedowns, win minutes on top, maybe look for the finish that way. But I'm totally with you, man. In striking exchanges, he's going to be outclassed dramatically. Buckley really hasn't been in there with anyone near the level of striking ability of Thompson. Was KO'd by the likes of Chris Curtis, who's a good fighter, but just not on the level of Thompson in terms of striking. Thompson in the big cage is going to be very elusive. 65% takedown defense isn't great, but again, I don't know that Buckley is on the same level of the Gilbert Burnses, the Bilal Muhammads, the Shavkat Rakhmonovs that have been able to take Thompson down recently. So it's interesting. I think whoever wins is going to look like the clear favorite here. It's like if Buckley can get those takedowns, he's probably going to dominate. If he can't, Thompson's probably going to piece him up and potentially find that KO. And I do think the altitude could play a factor here. Buckley, since he's cut down, his cardio has improved, but he still carries a lot of muscle. If he's really kind of chasing those takedowns, it may be tough for him to kind of carry that pace, carry that pressure for 15 minutes. And yeah, man. I mean, Thompson, we've seen in so many 5-round fights, even when he's grappling, does a good job kind of balancing his gas tank. So I think Thompson's a very live underdog here, man. And it's tough because, I don't know, Buckley's made major improvements. That Luque fight was weird, but I mean, great performance. I think Ruzaboyev was a little bit overrated, but at the same time, he looked excellent in that spot. lean right now is on Thompson on the value, but if Buckley can find those takedowns, I mean, he is going to probably justify his price tag as the favorite. I think I have to go with Thompson here on principle. He is getting up there in age, not a guy who's taken a ton of damage through his career. Really good striking defense, doesn't take much damage in exchanges, and he doesn't fight all that often either. So he's going to be able to get up there in age. But yeah, I think I have to side with Thompson here at this price. I'm a little bit surprised the line's not closer.
Yeah, exactly. I can see it certainly Buckley favored, but to get plus 150, 160 on Thompson, I'm right there with you, man. We'll look now at this women's bantamweight, or sorry, strawweight matchup between Yasmin Lucindo and Marina Rodriguez. Lucindo favored here in this spot, minus 180 against Rodriguez, who could be had at plus 150. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, this is another one I'm kind of leaning with the underdog. I just think we're seeing two fighters here, and the market's kind of looking at recency bias and pricing them based off that. I mean, Rodriguez was kind of pieced apart by Andrade at UFC 300. I mean, she did hang in that fight for moments, though. Had the win over Waterson Gomez, lost to some tough grapplers in Janarova and Lemos, but she's fighting the who's who of the division. I mean, we're looking through what Lucindo's been doing, as impressive as she is. I mean, a win over Rogan Walker, that does nothing for me. Polyana Viana, really kind of a one-trick pony. Karolina Kovacevic, decent fighter, but up there in age. I think Rodriguez is the better technical striker in this matchup. Really elusive, puts out insane volume on the feet. Lucindo's tough. She's going to be throwing, and she's going to be throwing hard, but I don't think if she gets her grappling going, she's going to be doing too well for 15 minutes. So it's a question of will Lucindo grapple here? I do think she probably looks for it at least a little bit, but at the same time, Rodriguez's takedown defense has improved dramatically since that Jandarova fight. We saw it in the Waterson Gomez fight. I just think this is kind of two classes here, and will I be shocked if the younger fighter gets it done as the favorite? Certainly not. But again, I mean, we're looking for value. We're trying to recommend which side you want to be on, and if this goes for 15 minutes, I'd rather be on the Rodriguez side. She lands more. They both absorb about the same number of strikes, but Rodriguez really crisp boxing, likes to throw up the middle. Lucindo tough, strong, puts out volume, but a little bit more loopy in what she's throwing there. So I don't know. I like the value on the dog. Not going to be shocked if Lucindo's able to take her down and kind of work her on the mat, but it seems more likely than not we get a striking fight here. So I do like the value on Rodriguez.
It's a tough fight to call. I certainly see your argument. I certainly think Rodriguez is more of the value side. Not sure what really warrants Lucindo here, a 22-year-old, to be favored by such a considerable margin. I think her, the younger fighter, the more efficient grappler. Certainly what we've seen out of Rodriguez when it comes to takedowns, she can defend some. She can pop right back up on some occasions. But when you really are stronger, able to get on top and control her, she is going to struggle in those sorts of fights. Here's striking as well, as you highlighted. Rodriguez the advantage, but I wouldn't say it's that significant. I mean, certainly what Lucindo is able to do. Still just 22 years old. She constantly moves forward. She constantly throws, even though her bread is really buttered when it comes to offensive grappling. And that'll again likely be the path that she looks to execute here, facing a striker like Rodriguez. Rodriguez longer, lankier fighter. Some would say easier to take down. Lucindo as well, scoring takedowns. Beating Kovacevic her last time out. I think if able to do so in that fight, she should be able to in this fight here too. Just visualizing it, seeing her scoring a couple takedowns is really what's making this tough for me, because I also find it unlikely that she does finish Marina Rodriguez. If it is a fight that goes to decision, as you said, holding a ticket, would you rather have a plus money side, maybe landing more strikes? Very well could be the case. So yeah, certainly want to check out our article come Saturday for my final thoughts on this matchup, but definitely don't fault anyone going with the underdog here. Certainly think Rodriguez is live, especially as this is likely to go to the scorecards. But yeah, that 15-year age gap is just that's tough for me to want to go to the window with.
Fair.
What's that? Yeah.
I said that's fair. Yeah, historically, that's not a good thing.
All right, we'll look now at this lightweight matchup between Austin Hubbard and Alexander Hernandez. Hernandez minus 210, the favorite in this fight against Austin Hubbard. Coming together a bit of short notice. It's a tough fight as well to call. Just at this number, I think it's about right. Hernandez perhaps a bit too prohibitively favored. I do view him as the right side, though. tends to burn a bit hot early, but as Hernandez has now gotten a significant number of UFC fights under his belt, he's starting to figure it out a bit more. You can't just go in there looking to kill guys. And against an opponent such as Austin Hubbard, I certainly don't think that's going to play the great effect. Hubbard is somebody who trains at elevation, and if this fight gets into late round 2, round 3, he has all the skills to get Hernandez out of there. We've seen Hernandez gas in the past, and we've seen Hubbard really come on in those rounds 2 and 3. I just think early on, Hernandez is going to find a lot of success against Hubbard that we haven't necessarily seen. Hubbard eats a significant amount of punches in his fights. He's normally there to be hit. And again, a smaller, more compact opponent, ripping to the body, landing much harder. I think that's going to be a problem for Hubbard here. Hubbard strikes well, like he lends decent volume and he has good boxing when he moves forward, but it's nothing very significant. He can string together decent combinations. But when it comes to effective strikes landing, it's going to be from the side of Hernandez more often. Hubbard also comfortable in terms of his grappling, but if anyone's grappling in this fight, it's probably just Hernandez mixing in, a blast double and taking this fight to the mat when he can. Again, I worry about him conserving his energy effectively, and that's probably why I'm not going to bet him at this number. But yeah, I think he's rightfully favored over Hubbard. In terms of skill set, in terms of opponents faced prior, he certainly has the edge over him. So I think he's going to end up winning this matchup. It's just, again, it's kind of a tough one to pick, tough one stylistically for him. If this does get into rounds 2 and round 3, maybe I'll end up putting some money on Hernandez and, hedging if we see it sort of going the way of Hubbard as it starts to go late.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much aligned on this one. I do think Hernandez is the rightful favorite, but if it gets out of the first round, he's very likely to be in trouble. Again, this fight is taking place at elevation. Hernandez also spent most of his career recently, at least, training at Factory X. There's rumors that gym's kind of fallen apart, so I don't know exactly where he is now. But even for someone who trains at altitude, this is a guy who's gassed in many of his fights. We see it constantly. So he's going to need to come out here and overwhelm Hubbard. And if he can't find that finish in the first, maybe the first half of the second round, I do think we start to see the tides turn. I mean, we've seen that with Hubbard in the past. I mean, going all the way back to that Roche Cup fight. I mean, almost 10-8'd in that first round and then completely dominated him until he quit on the stool. I mean, could see something similar happen here. Hernandez needs to come out aggressive. If he doesn't, I do think he's going to start the fade, and that's usually where we see Hubbard kind of take over late. So I do think there's some value on Hubbard, but only late. I do think Hernandez is more likely than not to find that finish early. But I'll say this, the inside the distance is around plus 140 last I checked. Maybe that's your best bet, because I think it's either going to be Hernandez early or Hubbard late. I think either way, we probably see a finish. If it goes to the scorecards, which is obviously a possibility, it could be dicey, but you're getting decent plus money on this finishing inside. So I'd rather just take that than put any confidence on either side. Again, I think Hernandez, my most likely outcome is that he finds that early finish. But if he doesn't, Hubbard very live to kind of take over late. So a bit binary of a fight in a different way. We got a front runner and kind of a guy who comes on at the end of the fight. So I don't know. I think Hernandez gets it done, but losing 4 of his last 5, he's been historically a big disappointment. I don't know. I'm really not high on Hubbard at all, but I do think he has the much better cardio here. So can Hernandez finish him or not? That's the question. Maybe if you have a big play on Hernandez or you have him tied into parlays, if the first round ends, maybe start putting some money on Hubbard to kind of hedge yourself out of that situation, because I do think Hernandez wins the first round almost 100% of the time. Hubbard wins the third almost 100% of the time. It's really going to come down to how the cardio looks and what happens in between. But tough fight to call. I'd rather just play the inside.
All right. Next, we will look at a middleweight matchup between Cesar Almeida and Ihor Potieria. Almeida swelling to a minus 400 favorite in the spot against Potieria, who could be had at 3-1. I like Almeida here, certainly rightfully favored. I don't know about this number per se, but yeah, Potieria does not seem that great. And when it comes out, this fight is likely going to play out. He's probably going to get caught by Almeida. Almeida in his last fight suffering his first professional loss, coming from the realm of kickboxing. In that fight against Roman Kopylov, we saw Kopylov successful on 5 of his 9 attempted takedowns, and that was enough to get the victory. Blasting through powerful takedowns and getting Almeida to the mat, where he did struggle to get back to his feet. Potieria, awkward southpaw striker. not somebody who's really efficient when it comes to getting fights to the ground. Perhaps he will shoot here, as he knows he's outclassed standing against Almeida, but I find that unlikely. And even if he does, I'm not certain that he will have success. As this fight plays out on the feet, Almeida is the much more skilled striker. We will see his kickboxing win out over Potieria as this one plays out. And yeah, I really like what we've seen out of him. I don't think the ceiling's all that high, but the middleweight division is rather thin. It's telling that a Potieria, a guy that seems to be on pay-per-views all the time, is again getting fed to this minus 400 favorite, on the come up. I think that's largely based on his background in kickboxing and just, the new phenomenon with all the excellent kickboxers coming right to the UFC. Note Pereira at the top of the card. I think another reason Almeida is getting the rub here with what I view as a pretty easy matchup. So I like him. I'm going to be tying him into some parlays and hoping Potieria does not ruin my night.
Yeah, man. Again, Almeida's on this card because of his history with Pereira. 1 and 2 against him in kickboxing. Does have a decision win over Alex Pereira, but we're talking all the way back in 2013. Really dynamic striker. Definitely the better striker in this matchup. I think whenever we get Almeida against a grappler, you can probably look to the grappler to have some success. But Potieria has never recorded a takedown in the UFC across 5+ fights, and I don't think that we're going to see that here. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I think Almeida gets it done inside, but even the KO for him is juiced up over minus 200 now. It's really tough to kind of find that angle. Potieria, I mean, if he suddenly decides to start grappling, maybe he could pull off the upset, but we've never seen that out of him before, so it's tough for me to really kind of project that or expect it. And Potieria, too, a guy who kind of takes some time to get going. We saw it in that fight against Burchik. Or was it Burchik? Yeah, he started terribly, and then he ate a nut shot, and he started to take over as that fight wore on. Almeida's kind of a front runner. He's going to come out shot out of a cannon. Probably finds that finish in the first or second rounds. But as long as this fight's on the feet, this is 2 classes we're talking about here. Potieria would need to get grappling going to be a live underdog, and we just haven't seen it from him before. So I like Almeida. Again, I'll probably time him to parlays right there with you, but at the same time, I mean, the line is getting a little bit inflated, so proceed with some caution.
All right. Moving on to the early prelims. Again, the card begins 6:30. You should see the first fight. The last of the 3 early prelims comes at light heavyweight with Ryan Spann taking on Ovin St. Preux. Spann minus 370 in the spot against OSP, who could be at plus 275. This fight was booked in September, but Ovin St. Preux pulled out due to illness. I believe day of or day before the fight. Spann's on a 3-fight losing streak now, and yet still significantly favored over OSP, coming off a win in his last performance. But that was the first OSP win we've seen in quite a while. He's a very steady, very slow presence in the octagon. And that fight was just grueling to watch, especially having the opposite side. But OSP is still just there. He's always there. He's always landing strikes. He's eating strikes, but eating them well for the most part. Spann's so dynamic, so hot early in his fights. He's probably going to get in there right away and look to hurt OSP. But certainly there are pitfalls for him in this matchup. I think during the initial booking, I like Spann a bit more, but just as I sit here and look at it, and 3 losses for Spann, and he was never all that good. OSP may have never all been that good either, but I mean, back he was good. He's just no good anymore. Out of the Southwest stance, I could see him flipping Spann. I could see Spann perhaps a bit too overconfident in his own grappling and getting caught by something against Ovin St. Preux, somebody who's shown capable of finishing fights on the mat. And yeah, as this number swells, if we're just a betting show, if we're looking for pure money line value, OSP is one of the better dogs on the card, in my opinion. I mean, it's a light heavyweight fight. Both guys potent finishing ability, and yeah, if this one plays out to go later too, if Spann does fight aggressively early and sort of expend his energy, again, that steady presence of OSP, it could take over, could win another very, very boring decision. These two are probably going to be hugging a lot against the side of the cage, jockeying for position, wasting a lot of minutes here. And again, that's going to favor OSP. He's a guy that could win in those boring sorts of fights. So not official yet, but certainly one of the underdogs I am eyeing. Ovin St. Preux getting good plus money this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of these matchups on this card where there's someone who's really good early and then they tend to start to fade. I mean, that's what we're getting here with Brian Spann. Definitely a public finisher, but coming off 3 losses, could be fighting for his roster spot here. Probably doesn't want to lose. Could definitely be a guy that we see end up cut. But yeah, I mean, OSP, kind of a career resurgence ever since USADA fell out of the picture. Not to speculate too much, but kind of think he's back on steroids if he ever was before. Winning 2 of his last 3, a guy who many thought would probably be cut from the promotion. But yeah, I mean, he's surviving. That win over Kennedy Njoku, sending Kennedy up to heavyweight, which I don't think is the wisest move, but he does a good job kind of throwing that front kick, keeping guys away from him, just kind of frustrating them. And before they know it, I mean, it's the 3rd round, and they're like, oh, shoot, I never found that KO. I only landed 20 strikes, and OSP landed 25. So yeah, I think the clearest path for OSP here is just to keep things close on the feet, mostly keep the fight standing. But you bring up a great point. Obviously, the signature Von Preux, Von Flue choke, if he does take the fight to the mat, could maybe find that against Spann. Spann, super inconsistent. I mean, the KO of Dominic Reyes, the win over Kudalaba looked excellent. Really flat the last 3 times out, especially against Guskov, who I don't rate that highly at all. But again, this 205-pound division has just not been great. Really tough to get excited about much right now in this division outside of the top 5, top 10. Ryan Spann has just proven not to be the prospect that many thought he would be coming out of the Contender Series. OSP getting up there in age, definitely taking the right vitamins and minerals now, though. So maybe we're seeing a bit of a resurgence from him in a very shallow division. So wouldn't shock me to see him get a win here, maybe find his way back in the rankings with another one after that. But at the same time, I mean, most likely outcome, if you're asking me, it's probably Spann KO first round. But similar to the Hernandez Hubbard fight, if it gets extended, I think we're going to see a very live underdog. So I'm a little bit undecided on this one as well, kind of leaning Spann just off the youth and explosiveness early, kind of what we saw with Linz against OSP. But yeah, can't really be confident in either of these guys right now. Value's probably on OSP, but do you want to put your hard-earned money on this guy at this point in his career? Probably not. Maybe just sit back and watch this one. Could be very boring if it goes 15 minutes, but I think more likely than not, we see that finish from Spann early.
All right. Yeah, probably will be boring. Probably miss the early prelims here. I would not sweat it. We'll look now at this women's strawweight fight between Tisha Pennington and Carla Esparza. Pennington the -170 favorite against Esparza, who could be had +140. Interesting fight here. Esparza got beat down in their last fight. That was nearly 2 years ago now, facing the champion Zhang Weili, getting submitted there. She's 36 years old now, and this is going to be the last fight in the UFC for Carla Esparza. Retiring here, win or lose. Pennington getting the rub from her wife, Raquel, the champion on the card. I like Tisha Pennington a lot. I'm a fan of her. I like her fight style. Aggressively fighting, moving forward, throwing a high volume of strikes. Maybe doing steroids. If you're going to accuse OSP, I think Tisha Pennington, definitely someone who had been on the juice in the past. But yeah, Esparza, obviously what she wants to do in a lot of fights is utilize the wrestling. That's what we saw the success from her in her early career. She was successful in just 3 of her previous 15 attempted takedowns in the UFC. That all coming in her last 35 minutes of cage time. Just struggling to get fights to the mat, even though she needs to take them there. And yeah, I figure that to be the case here against Pennington too. These are 2 of the smaller girls that you're going to see at the strawweight division. Oftentimes when it comes to betting Tisha Pennington, I'm a bit nervous just due to the fact she's undersized, and that won't be the case here today. Should hold her own here. Again, landing near more than double the significant strikes per minute of Carla Esparza. And yeah, again, effectively using her range, I think she should be able to keep Esparza at the end of her punches. And I trust her enough to defend takedowns here in this spot. Don't mind betting her -170 as the favorite here. Maybe even running myself a little Pennington parlay. But yeah, I like her in this spot. I think Esparza retirement fight, it's tough for me to want to bet her.
Yeah, whenever you hear a fighter bring up retirement, I feel like we need to check the numbers on it. But it seems like 9 out of 10 times they lose. Unless you're Robbie Lawler, but it almost always goes poorly. We see Fight Week this week, and Watterson running around with her kid. It's nice, it's wholesome, but that doesn't necessarily prepare you for a fight like this. And I did hear word that Tisha was considering retiring if she didn't have a good performance against Ricci. But even at a loss, she felt really good about that fight. And me personally, I thought she won. I thought that was a bad robbery. I thought she did a great job keeping keeping it standing. And prior to that, she took on Mackenzie Dern, albeit a little while back. But those are two really tough grapplers. So she's familiar with the style of matchup that she's going to be dealing with here. 65% takedown defense, but that's continued to improve throughout her career. Esparza, obviously a very talented and gifted wrestler, but has trouble at time closing the distance. Tisha going to put out a ton of volume, work well on the cage. I do think she gets it done. I'm not loving the price, but again, with Esparza mentioning retirement, I do think you have to kind of take Tisha here. Expect her to keep it standing, kind of win this fight on the feet. If Carla's kind of getting picked apart, who's to say she doesn't just quit in the middle of the fight? Certainly already has one foot out of the door. Talking about leaving it all in the cage, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that makes her a little bit more reckless, but a fighter who lands only around 2.1 significant strikes per minute, just not going to be able to hang on the feet in terms of volume against Pennington. But yeah, I mean, we've seen Waterson in the past as a heavy underdog against Yan Xiaonan. I think back to the Waterson Gomez, Marina Rodriguez fights. Like, these are all fights that she was a heavy underdog in, was able to get her grappling going, captured the title in that terrible fight against Rose Namajunas where almost nothing happened. But her style's tough, and it's tough for a lot of girls. I just think Pennington strong enough to mostly keep this standing where she should be able to dominate and pull away. Not a fight I'm going to have much money on either side. Because it is very binary, even though I don't want to put anything on Esparza as the better grappler. But yeah, it's fun enough. I mean, it should be pretty high action for however long it lasts. Just, I like Pennington here, just not loving the price necessarily.
Alrighty, and now looking at the first fight of the night and our last two breakdown. This fight, Tim Means minus 240, the favorite against Court McGee. This fight at welterweight, tough one to pick, tough really to trust either one of these guys. I'm leaning slightly the way of Means, who is the moderate favorite. He's somebody who hasn't looked great lately, and he's somebody who's going to be looking to shoot takedowns in general in his fights. We've seen him, successful scoring at least one in his previous couple. But yeah, Means is somebody who presents a lot of challenges when it comes to looking for those takedowns. Means in his just general awkwardness, his fidgetiness on the feet. He's a tough guy to track down. If you are going to put your neck in and look to take down Tim Means, that presents a lot of opportunities for him. He's somebody who has threatened with chokes and certainly has a good guillotine to his credit. Something I would worry about McGee as he presents his neck and looking for those takedowns here. But yeah, largely, it's probably going to be a fight between two veterans that plays out for the most part on the feet. If McGee's unable to get this fight to the mat, he's going to struggle in a lot of those exchanges, not only because his technical skill is a bit worse than that of Means, but Means also throws with pretty good volume in all of his fights. The number's a significant strike better than McGee. He's landing higher than 5 significant strikes per minute to Means is. But yeah, he's constant, making sure to pressure opponents any way he can. Very good at closing the distance, landing elbows in the clinch. He has more weapons in general, I would say, than McGee, who's a bit, fundamentally sound, sure, effective with his offensive grappling, yes, but in terms of finishing ability or in terms of one punch power, he doesn't have it. Really, Means doesn't either. And then again, just with this fight taking place at altitude, neither guy one that I want to trust, but I do think Means, with that proven cardio, putting out significant strikes to those numbers in the past, should be able to do so here against an opponent who's also about to be 40, as Means is. So yeah, I'm siding with him, but yeah, one of the least confident picks I have this card. Certainly not putting much money on the opener.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, two guys getting up there in age, obviously. I will say McGee looked a lot better against Morono his last time out than I think anyone expected him to. Coming off some ugly losses, did a good job kind of, extending that fight, keeping things close. I think that's his path to victory here. I mean, he is a considerable underdog, but Means is the more dangerous striker. You mentioned the clinch. I mean, the elbows especially, just something you don't want to deal with. And McGee, for most of his career, kind of known as a really durable guy with a solid chin, but falling via KO in 2 of his last 3. So it's tough to really bank on that here. I do think the value is probably on the McGee side, but at the same time, I don't know that he's going to grapple enough to really, edge it out on the scorecards. Means is going to be landing the more damaging shots. McGee might be able to keep things close. But I don't know. I think the big moments probably favor Means. I'm with you though. You can't really back Means as a -200, -230 some places as a 40-year-old, even though he's taking on another guy who's getting up there in age. The Fiala one was awesome. I was heavy on Means there. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy. I mean, he wins fights against guys who aren't very durable, tends to struggle against grapplers. McGee in his prime was a really good grappler with solid cardio, but we don't know which version of him we're going to see here. So again, two guys who are pretty volatile, getting up there in age. I mean, Father Time remains undefeated. Neither of these two certainly are. I do think Means is the rightful favorite, but at this price, I just don't really see myself getting there. Could see maybe taking a stab on McGee, maybe betting decision only on McGee, because if there is a finish, I do think it's on the Mean side. Would like to see what that number looks like. I know some books offer that. But yeah, I think if it goes 15, McGee could be live, but Means is going to land the bigger shots. Definitely more likely to find the finish here. Means has struggled against submission grapplers. Don't really know that McGee has that in his bag at this point in his career. So I think Means is the pick. Very low confidence right there with you, though.
All right, man. Well, it was certainly good breaking down this card. UFC 307 will be yours this Saturday. And be sure, as always, to check out our predictions Saturday morning on Dine Sports after weigh-ins, our official picks and predictions for each of these fights. Thank you, as always, for watching, everyone. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Nick, thank you. Have a good one.
Good luck.